I'm Bree, and this is Makeup, Movies, and Stuff, where I do my makeup, talk about movies, and stuff. A friend suggested that I try my hand at a YouTube series showcasing my makeup skills. My boyfriend Carl and I discussed what I could do for a series. He said makeup tutorials, but I don't know how to do stuff. I'm the F around and find out type. He said I should do makeup and talk about what I know about movies, kind of like what Bailey Sarian does on her amazing channel, Murder, Mystery, and Makeup. So that's what I decided on, because if I could ever make a living with the useless stuff I know about movies, pop culture, in general, I'd be set. The first part of my series is going to be a little different, however, due to an additional idea we had. My bestie Susie and I are currently, and have been for a few years now, totally obsessed with the band Ice Nine Kills, whose most recent albums, Silver Scream and Silver Scream 2 Welcome to Horrorwood, are awesome. Each song is based on a different horror or dark movie, and we've been marathoning the movies the songs are based on. Carl suggested that for my first movies, I go through each song and the movie it's based on. I figured I would start this series with track 1 of the first album, The American Nightmare, based on 1984's Wes Craven classic, A Nightmare on Elm Street, starring Heather Langenkamp, a very young Johnny Depp, and of course, Robert Englund. And now, Robert Englund didn't get Mark Hamill the part of Luke Skywalker. They may or may not have been roommates, I don't remember. I remember definitely Mark Hamill saying that this never happened. Mark was already an accomplished actor by the time he got Star Wars. I mean, not accomplished, but his career he had one. However, A Nightmare on Elm Street did launch Johnny Depp's career. And no, Fred Krueger is not the name of an actual child killer who we found the tombstone. If you read all the way through that meme, it was just a joke. Actually, Fred Krueger is named after Wes Craven's childhood bully. A little reminder that this movie is rated R and it's a horror movie. The song and the movie do contain adult language and adult content, and since we are doing a review of the movie, there are going to be spoilers, so please watch at your discretion. Oh, let's get this wet. Hang on. There you go. And I'm back. A Nightmare on Elm Street was written and directed by Wes Craven, who happened to have a conservative upbringing, which is in contrast to his later work, obviously. He was in a movie called Fireworks Woman. He played a character named Abe Snake. He created The Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes, and The Swamp Thing. The idea for A Nightmare on Elm Street comes from a few different places, but mostly Wes Craven read several newspaper articles in the 1970s about Hmong refugees who would flee to the United States due to all of the horrible things that were happening in Laos, I hope I said that right, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And they were suffering disturbing nightmares and refusing to sleep. In many of these Asian cultures, according to Robert Englund, when they would have nightmares, they would get up and they would paint their nightmares or write them to kind of purge the nightmare. When they got to America, for some reason, they could not do this. And 13 people actually died. And they didn't die of heart attacks, they just died from these horrible nightmares. And they called it the Asian Death Syndrome, which is probably not the best name today. He also drew inspiration from the song Dreamweaver, essentially getting from it the synthesizer. I didn't do that very well, but you know, you know this one. And also from some Eastern religions. Some claim that it also came from a 68 student film horror parody that was filmed on Elm Street in New York. In the 80s, video cassettes started to pick up as an entertainment medium. And because of this, there was an odd boom in horror films. Not really sure why horror films, but there you have it. People at home like to watch horror movies by themselves, like I just did an hour ago. Countless money troubles throughout production. The first studio to take interest in A Nightmare on Elm Street was actually shit. It wasn't shit. Walt Disney Studios, but they obviously wanted them to tone the movie down somehow. I can't even imagine, but if you think about the movies, the live action movies that were coming out in the 80s, Watcher in the Woods, and I mean, before that you had The Black Hole, and just these very disturbing, dark movies that were coming out of live action Walt Disney, which probably has a lot to do with Michael Eisner, who was constantly pushing to make Disney edgier and reaching out to more demographics than just families and kids. Another one was Paramount. They looked at it and said, nope, because it's too similar to Dreamscape, which came out the same year, which is a movie starring Dennis Quaid, Kate Capshaw from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. That's my favorite one, actually. Max von Sydow and Christopher Plummer, so some veteran actors in that. They have this more of a sci-fi version of the Dark Crystal's dream fasting, kind of similar to Inception, but the premise is they want to weaponize dreams for assassinations. Haven't seen it, just researched it. Universal sent a pretty blah letter of rejection saying basically, don't call us, we'll call you, once you have something that's, filmable, we'll take a look. Wes Anderson. I'm sorry, Wes Craven, not Wes Anderson. Wes Craven framed the letter later on in kind of a snarky way. I love it. Love that kind of pettiness. Some other studios that put up money were Media Home Entertainment, Heron Communication, and Smart Egg Pictures. The original budget was $700,000. It only went up to about 1.1, or depending on the sources, 1.8 million. It's a pittance. That is no money. Even in the 80s, that was no money to make a movie with. A pittance, that's a word, right? Define pittance. Not Peter Brett. Stop. There we go. Pittance. Very small or inadequate amount of money paid to someone as an allowance or wage. So I did use it correctly. Let it be known. There was at one point a investor who got in a car accident and killed somebody, and they took the money that they had been given for production of the movie and just effing ran, like disappeared. One of the producers found out about it on her birthing bed for her child, obviously. Anyway, and had to coordinate basically a new deal from the hospital having her baby. Props to her. The main executive producer was a man named Bob Shaye. Bob Shaye produced, I believe it's produced, Reefer Madness. You know, that movie from the 50s, 60s that showed how bad marijuana was. The one, that one. Yeah, no, the one. One of the main characters is an actor named Dave O'Brien, who I happen to know from a later Bela Lugosi movie called The Devil Bat, which is like unintentionally hilarious, but also pretty cool. Now let's talk about Freddy Krueger. I don't want blush. I don't want this. Yes, I do. I want this. Okay. Freddy Krueger. In the first movie, he is credited as Fred Krueger, not Freddy. I mean, that's what they call him in the movie, is Fred Krueger. It's what's written in his hat. I think Nancy calls him Freddy one time at the end when she's telling him what a piece of shit he is. Like I said, Freddy's name came from Wes's childhood bully named Fred Krueger. In fact, on the last house on the left, there is a character named Krug, or Krug. Krug. Probably Krug. I haven't seen that one either. Bear with me. I'm slowly watching all of the classics. Slowly. We're getting there. I always assumed that Freddy was a child molester. Turns out he was supposed to be. And for those of you coming at me because he is in the remake, I have not seen the remake. I didn't know that. I thought I was clever for thinking he was a child molester. Anyway, he ended up not being a child molester specifically because there was a rash of child molestation cases in California at the time of filming, so they shied away from that kind of thing. But there is an incredible amount of sexuality, as there is in many, many horror films, good and bad. Tina's death is evocative of a rape. There is the attack in the bathtub with the glove coming up between Nancy's legs. Rods hanging. I mean, I'm stretching here, but rods hanging could be evocative of autoerotic asphyxiation. Autoerotic asphyxiation. Yes. There's the kissing phone with Freddy's mouth is the bottom part, and like licking Nancy's face, and the mother's fiery death at the end. She's on the bed, she's pinned down. That's a rape. It's very clear. There's a lot of undertones of sexuality in it. And also the sex scene is horrible. It is so bad. It is uncomfortable. It's silly. His appearance and nature, a lot of it came, again, from Wes's childhood experiences. Apparently he saw an older gentleman, burn survivor, in a trench coat, which Freddy was originally supposed to have a trench coat, but it was scrapped early on until later movies. Apparently he has a trench coat. I've only seen the first one, and I didn't have time to catch up on the 43 other movies. I don't know how many there are. Again, I'm sorry. He saw this older man in the trench coat on his sidewalk outside his house, and he looked at him. He's this burn survivor, burns everywhere, and that image stuck with him. It scared him very deeply. He wanted Freddy to have a mask, as was kind of tradition already with the slashers of the time. You had Mike Myers, you had Jason, and he was originally going to be a stoic, big, hulking creature like the other killers, but he decided that he still wanted him to have a mask to make him unnatural, but that he wanted him to be able to taunt and exude an evil. Wes Anderson, oh my god, I'm gonna do that 100 times. Wes Craven, where's that quote? Oh, there it is. Okay. Wes Craven once said, "In a sense, Freddy stands for the worst of parenthood and adulthood. The dirty old man, the nasty father, and the adult who wants children to die rather than help them prosper. He's the boogeyman and the worst fear of children, the adult that's out to get them. He's a very primal figure, sort of like Kronos, devouring his children. That evil, twisted, perverted father figure that wants to destroy and is able to get them at their most vulnerable, which is when they're asleep." Some have speculated that Freddy's attacks are symbolic of adolescent traumas. The boiler room, there was a lot more filmed for that. They had a sleeping area where it made him look like a hobo. You know, he's a reject. He's living and sleeping where he works, and he's got naked Barbies all around, and this is where he would have forged his glove, which he does in the first scene, but it is not Robert Englund's hands, you see. It is Charles Bellardinelli, who was the only one who knew how to properly put the glove together, and so they used his hands. And where Freddy would have taken his victims to kill them, the children. They say that he's like an old drunk in a hat, basically, with the just filthy, filthy hat. Originally, his sweater was going to be red and yellow. He would manifest always in red and yellow, which is what Plastic Man wore. He's like a C-list superhero. It was meant to make that connection because both Freddy and Plastic Man can change their forms, but everything was going to show up red and yellow. However, Wes read an article in the 1982 Scientific American saying that the most clashing colors to the human retina are red and green. And so it gives another layer of uncanny uncomfortableness about Freddy. I'm doing those colors on my makeup today. I don't know. Anyway, there were some concepts that were eventually dropped. For instance, he was going to be a lot more horrific. You could see the teeth through the flesh over his jaw, pus running down his face, and you could see his skull through his head. That got dropped because the makeup artist, he said that it couldn't be convincingly done on an actor, and to do it on a puppet would be hard to do, and puppets don't usually mesh with live actors well. He thought the look of it would be kind of too much. So they went for the more subtle burn survivor. He's not a burn survivor, he died. Burn victim. Another idea that was eventually dropped was the idea of him killing with a sickle. It just seemed like a little much, but that was there for a little while. Eventually they came up with the glove, which was a collaborative effort between Craven and Doyle. It was a glove full of steak knives. Originally it was going to be made with fishing knives, and then it was actually made with tomato knives. I figured that the design for the glove was cheap to make for someone who lives a hobo lifestyle. You would need it to be cheap to make, and for a serial killer, it needs to be easy to transport and to hide. The knives, they come from a very primal fear. He mentioned that he wanted fingernails because it was similar to animal claws, and he had seen his cat's claws unsheathed, and that kind of sparked it for him, for Craven. There were 2 gloves. There was a hero glove, who was only meant for cutting and was incredibly dangerous because it was real sharpened knives used for cutting. And Robert England actually cut himself doing this motion, I believe. Cut himself, just blood everywhere. And then the other glove was used with fake blunt knives for the dangerous shit he did, like running around and things like that. Casting for Freddy, the first choice for Freddy was an actor named David Warner. I know him from Tron as Ed Dillinger, but he's been in countless other things, and he's done a lot of voice work too. But yeah, I know him as Ed Dillinger / Sark / the MCP from Tron. Wes did look at having an actor like Kane Cotter, who was up for the role, who later went on to portray Jason Voorhees in the Friday the 13th movies, because he considered this hulking figure that had been so popular for so many horror films. But he said he figured out on, I think it was The Hills Have Eyes, that it doesn't really matter how big your monster is, they really have to, like I said, exude that evil. It is hard to do this and talk at the same time. I don't know how Bailey does it. So eventually they came upon Robert England, who is a master. The only notable part that England had prior to this was one of the reptilian alien race from the original series of V. I have not seen that either, but I intend to at some point. What was most important is he was an actor, not a stuntman. So it was a very different kind of feel for his Freddy. At the audition, he put cigarette ash under his eyes and put like grease, like oil, I believe from his car, into his hair. And he just acted rat-like or weasel-like. Robert said that when we hear about abusers or, serial killers especially, it is very rarely this big hulking figure. It is more often this weasel-like outcast. Regarding his gait, Wes wanted him to have this sidle like a gangster, that slimy kind of confidence. Robert was playing him. He found that the actual glove with the actual knives in it was so heavy, the hero glove, that he was unintentionally dropping his shoulder. And so he pictured himself as like a gunslinger, always poised and ready with the glove. Then he came up with the sideways sidle by watching surfers on their surfboards. It was interesting. It's very similar to what they did for Tarzan in the Disney animated film. I'm sorry, I lost track. I haven't been doing the TikTok-y things like I was going to. Well, I'm gonna have to figure that out. Anyway, Robert England said that his idea of Freddy was from an experience of his own childhood, where it was Valentine's Day in the class, and there was one child who did not receive a single Valentine. Robert theorized that kid grew up to become Freddy, which I find interesting. A lot of childhood trauma tied to this movie. Heather Langenkamp. I certainly hope I said that right. Stripes are hard. Stripes are hard. How does that look? Oh, I like that. It's turning out pretty good. What was I saying? There were no Nancys that were auditioned without a... Well, that's not right. Sorry, it's taking me out of the zone, Harry Potter music. No. We are scary. What was I talking about? All the actresses were auditioned as Nancy, and then upon a callback, they would be brought back, some of them as Tina instead, and they would audition Nancy and Tina together to see who had chemistry. Then once they had that pair, they brought in the boys and auditioned the group together, as you do with any kind of movie with big main group. You gotta see what works, what doesn't. Nancy is seen as a feminist hero, basically. Heather Langenkamp has said so. She also said that Nancy has a very youth power sort of feel. Something just moved over here. If I die, you have footage. Because I am home alone with Freddie. Let's do that. Is that good? Pop that right up a little bit more. Yeah. Like that. Okay. There is a deleted scene also that reveals that Nancy had a sibling that ended up being killed by Freddie, which is very disturbing. I can't imagine. I grew up until I was about 6. I lived in Nebraska, and we had this paint splatter that was like this purpley red on the garage wall. No idea what it was really from, because it was there when we moved in, I guess. But my lovely, wonderful, loving parents told me that that was a blood stain that came from my older sister. I am the oldest child. Came from my oldest sister, whose name was started with an M, something like Mabel. Anyway, when she misbehaved and they had to kill her. I can't believe that happened. I promise I'm okay. I've been to a therapist. She says I'm great. As I mentioned, this launched Johnny Depp's career. I don't know if you've heard of him. It's not like he's been in the news lately or anything. You know. He was actually attending... This is hilarious. He was attending the audition for Glenn with his friend Jackie Earle Haley, who was auditioning for Glenn, and later ended up playing Freddie in the 2010 remake. This is the guy who played Rorschach in Watchmen. That's what I know him from. He's been in lots of other stuff too, like the Freddie, the remake. Yeah. Nick Cage is rumored to have auditioned for Glenn as well. He may or may not have actually done that, but it was Nick Cage's agent who lined Johnny up with the audition for the movie, apparently. I don't understand how that works when he was actually accompanying Haley. Well, I don't know if both are true. I don't know if neither are true. I don't know if one or the other is true. This is just information that I have researched from the actual movie, Wikipedia, the Movies That Made Us episode on Nightmare on Elm Street, and IMDb, and just things that I know. Charlie Sheen was actually up for the role of Glenn, but he turned it down. It was rumored for a long time that he turned it down because he wanted too much money. But Sheen himself says it was actually due to a lack of interest in the story. Basically, he said it sounded dumb. and he's regretted it ever since. I'm getting two different shapes here. The stripes are throwing me off. Like that. Like that. If this is a mess, bear with me. This is my first time trying to do this while talking about stuff. Stripes are hard. Nancy's parents, John Saxon and Ronnie Blake, were veteran actors. They had been in lots of things before. But the people that they portray, all the adults are broken. It's almost worse than the other... I'm sorry, I'm clicking this. It's almost worse than the other slasher films where they go after teenagers, but they are completely isolated and cut off from adults. In this, the adults are almost villains themselves. There's pushback, so Nancy cannot fight. She's gotta come up with it in a very creative way. Now, the special effects are something wild. They were headed by Jim Doyle, who did the movie with a special effects budget of $57,000. For such a special effects driven movie, that is an incredibly low amount of money. But they made it work. It is a very, very good example of how to make a budget work. There, I got some like fraying. And like that. It's kind of fading away over there. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say instead of I messed this up. Anyway, now for Tina, who was played by Amanda Weiss. She was listed as 15 in the script. She was actually 23 when she filmed it. All of these teenage actors were in their 20s. Funny enough, when Heather, Nancy, says, "Oh god, I look 20 years old," she was literally 20 years old. I don't know if it's an on-purpose dig, but I'm also offended because 20 is not old. Okay? Anyway, for Tina's death, at the beginning of the scene, she can hear lambs. Little lambs. Which is symbolic of her being a lamb to the slaughter. All the kids being lambs to the slaughter. The long arms that Freddy stretches across the street, side to side, was achieved with fishing poles and puppet arms on either side of the actor. I like the stripes. The good stripes. This one needs to be thicker, though. Thicker. This is not great. I'm getting two different shapes. See what I mean by I shouldn't do a makeup tutorial? Like, what the hell am I doing? We're gonna retry. Okay. Her death, when she, goes up the wall and across the ceiling, was achieved with a revolving room. They turned the room upside down, and then she crawled on the ceiling floor. Everything was bolted in and everything. Later on, when Nancy is seeing Tina's body in the body bag and a centipede comes out of her mouth, they tried to do the scene with Weiss having a rubber centipede, like pushing it out of her mouth, but it just never looked right. So eventually they used a real centipede, don't panic, and they had it come out of a clay sculpture of Weiss's mouth. There were 500 gallons of fake blood used. However, for Glenn's death, the geyser of blood, it was just red colored water. What they did is they used the same revolving room from Tina's death, turned it completely upside down, cut a hole through the floor, and just dumped water. First of all, the geyser of blood was meant to remind one of Stanley Kubrick's Shining elevator, where the blood pours out. And Stripes are hard. And they dumped the water. There was a set flood. It just whoosh, all came out, I believe, out the window of the room, and it like made the revolving room wonky. It just poured right out. And when that happened, there was a light fixture. It would have been the floor. There was a light fixture in the floor, and it was getting drenched in the water. And the special effects guys went to try and like turn it off before there was an electrocution, and got electrocuted. They didn't die, it just got a shock, and it was unpleasant. Now, Rod was played by Nick Corey, who reportedly was dealing with quite a bit of depression from a recent homelessness, and was doing heroin between takes. He revealed in 2014 that he was completely high in the jail scene, which Heather took for him to be giving performance of a lifetime, because his eyes were watery and he was like out of focus and everything like that, because he was high. Anyway, his death when Freddy goes through the bars was done with kind of a film equivalent of a Pepper's Ghost kind of trick, where they filmed the exact height of the actor, where he would be positioned with the bars there, filmed that, and then opened it and had Freddy walk through the same space. And they put the two shots together, and a matte artist, for those of you who don't know, a matte artist is what they used to use for blue screen type of effects, big scenes and everything like that. They would literally paint on either the film itself, or like in Darby O'Gill, they have this grand landscape behind the couple that are running down the hill. The whole landscape is kind of like a filter put in front of the camera, and the actors just walk in the space that is not painted. Anyway, the matte artist painted out the bars frame by frame so that Freddy would come through the bars. Very, very, very cool. The bathroom attack was done with a bottomless tub. So the set with the bathtub was built with a false bottom and set on top of a swimming pool. They used a stunt double for Nancy in that scene. And then the special effects guy went in to the pool with the glove. It's a little too red. Anyway, he was in the pool, and he did the thing. It was in a pool. Wes Anderson. Oh my god. I'm gonna shoot myself. Wes Craven asserts that this was the first time a breakaway mirror was used in a film. When Freddy jumps out at Nancy. Oh no, maybe I like that. Maybe I'll leave it. And then I'll do the real brown for the eyebrows. The bedroom scene with the wall where the face and hands come through, that's obviously it's a wall made of spandex that Robert was going on. The sinking stairs came from a nightmare that Bob Shea had as a child, childhood trauma. Wes Craven hated it. He just hated the idea, but Bob Shea had to have it. But it was done, they said, with either oatmeal or pancake batter. If you watch the scene, it looks like it's very clearly pancake batter. It might have been a mixture. And Tony Caesar was a special effects guy who did the... Shit's moving. I think somebody's home. I hope somebody's home. Oh, it's too black. Too black. He did the burning run when Nancy throws the gasoline on him, lights him on fire, which is just horrifying for a man who literally burned to death, if you think about it. So I guess Freddy gets his just desserts. Look at that eyebrow done. Just trying to blend. I'm sorry. When he did the run, he was supposed to. So he gets lit on fire. He runs around. Nancy gets past him. She runs up the stairs. He follows her. Nancy hits the door at him. He falls back down the stairs. That was supposed to be the end of it. He gets up and starts going back up the stairs, and then finally lays down, which is the cue for them to put him out. But he just he kept going, and it makes for a very, very scary scene. The sparks coming off the glove was done by hooking it up to a car battery, which sounds safe as hell. The iconic sound of the scraping of the knives comes from a steak knife used against the bottom of a metal chair. There were some mess ups, as you have in movies. For one thing, there are palm trees in Ohio. Skexis. Well, just continuity errors like you get. Nancy cut her foot running when she's running down the sidewalk away from Freddy. She stepped on a piece of glass and totally cut her foot open. Had to go to the hospital and then was back on set in hours. There's a kind of fun Easter egg chain that is between Wes Craven and Sam Raimi that starts with The Hills Have Eyes. In The Evil Dead, there is a Hills Have Eyes poster. Wes Craven created Hills Have Eyes. He saw that, and so as tribute to that, there is an Evil Dead scene in Nightmare on Elm Street when Nancy is trying to stay awake, which, funny enough, it's showing the end scene, but the screaming from it is actually from the tree rape scene, which, there goes rape again. I'll take rape for 500 Alex. That doesn't make any sense because they're in increments of 2. It would be like 600 or something. I don't watch Jeopardy anymore. Anyway, because of that, there is a Freddy glove. It's actually the original Freddy glove in The Evil Dead 2. And then there is a Freddy glove in Ash vs. Evil Dead also, which is not the original Freddy glove because the original Freddy glove has been lost on the set of one of the other Friday the 13th. It is believed to be in the possession of Robert Englund's agent. That's what I know. As far as locations, the school was filmed in John Marshall High School. Pretty in Pink was filmed at, and Grease. A lot of teen movies from the 80s were John Marshall High School. The boiler room scene and the police station were filmed at Lincoln Heights Jail in LA, which later got condemned for the amount of asbestos in it. There was some kerfuffle over the endings. Wes wanted no franchise. He never intended for Nightmare on Elm Street to be a franchise, and so he wrote a happy, slightly ambiguous ending in which Nancy doesn't believe in Freddy like she does in the other movie. She has her little labyrinth, you have no power over me moment, but with profanities. And then she wakes up to find that it was all a long nightmare. Everybody is alive, and her dead friends are alive. Her mom, who just died, is alive, and it's just all a long nightmare. And then unusually foggy day, and they drive off into the fog, where it's like, okay, so we are in the real world now, right? We don't know. But it appears to be happy ending. Bob Shea didn't like that. He wanted a twist ending. Now, I don't know if he specifically wanted to open it up for a possible franchise or if he just wanted a twist ending, because twist endings are badass. Originally, he wanted Freddy to be driving the car with the kids screaming in it. Said it was too 60s and that it was stupid and that he was not going to put Freddy in the car physically. However, they did film a few different endings. With Freddy driving was one. Another one was with the Freddy claws being the clasps for the convertible top. Another one was Freddy being the car, where he's like the red and green top of the convertible, which is what we ended up using. And then there was one with Freddy reaching through the door and pulling Mom through the door. And they decided that that one was too funny not to use. So they did it. They had screening, but they had to stop dead at one point. They had to stop the film in order to fix the ending, because the only one that they had was them driving off with Freddy, more closely related to the Craven ending. Bob Shea was like, no, we gotta have the Mom ending. So they stopped it dead. They added the Mom ending to the end of it. Because of this, partially, Paramount backed out of the film. But word of mouth through this review, this article, was so good that there ended up being a line around the block to see it. And over 1 million was made opening weekend, with it eventually making 25.5 million in the US and Canada, and about 57 million worldwide. So I think they made their budget back. I love the idea of the crucifix. The idea that this urban legend, this human, was so evil that it requires a crucifix to ward him off. He's just a man, but he's a monster of a man, even before he was killed. Do I like that? Yeah, I like that. There are a few interesting little tidbits. For instance, Elm Street, the words Elm Street are never said in the film, the first film, at all. Freddy is billed as Fred Krueger, not Freddy. And that's pretty much all they call him throughout the first movie. It's Fred Krueger. Nancy's door is blue in this first film, where it ends up being an iconic red door in the rest of the films. And if you notice, there happen to be no stripes on Freddy's sleeves in this film. They are just red. Wes, like I said, did not want Nightmare on Elm Street to be a franchise, and so he did not work on the sequel, Freddy's Revenge. And it shows. It's not a great movie. I guess I need to watch it again, but it's not nearly as good as the first one, in my humble opinion. Yeah, one good eye, one dirt eye. Good eye, dirt eye. I tried to do the Freddy claws here, and then it went derpy over here. Good eye, dirt eye. Anyway, there were a few comic books that were meant to be made, did end up getting made. There was a remake in 2010 that was meant to be a reboot, but it got panned. It did so poorly, the reboot idea was dropped. New Line has talked a little bit about maybe possibly someday there being a reboot, and Robert Englund is all for doing another one. And I am all for seeing Robert Englund do it again. In 2021, the Library of Congress recognized A Nightmare on Elm Street basically for being culturally important. That's where we are today with A Nightmare on Elm Street. And now for the Ice Nine Kills bit. The opening riff is melodically the same as the theme for Nightmare. Da, 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 along with Curse My Name, but I won't be forsaken. That little doo-doo-doo-doo-doo that happens at the end of every verse, I want to say. And this, obviously, it came from Dreamweaver and the composer Charles Bernstein. There are Obviously, many references to sleep and dreams, which is where Freddy takes his victims. Opening dialogue, music starts on "Dreams are normal too." Rest your head, here's a lullaby. A melody for heavy eyes. Early to bed, early to die. Welcome to your worst nightmare. This cruel hand will rock you to sleep. Counting the bodies while you count sheep. Past the street where they cursed my name, being Elm Street. Craven in the lyrics in the book for the album is literally written Craven, as in Wes Craven, instead of, Craven. Shallow grave where I went down in flames, referencing Freddy's death. The American nightmare as opposed to the American dream. Living the dream, literally. Freddy is living in dreams. I love the golden age of the silver scream. Silver nitrate having been used originally for film development, which is where that comes from, the silver screen. And also the black and white silvery look of films from the past. And of course, that's the album name, The Silver Scream. Sweet Dreams is a tagline or slogan from the movie. It was included. There are lots of references to the glove, fit like a glove, slashing, sinking my claws, the twisted hand of fate, where the glove is God. And then there's the line, wicked when I was just a man, referencing him being a child killer / child molester, whatever. Before I got the album, I thought the lyric was monster when I was just a man, not wicked when I was just a man. And I created an Ice Nine Kills jacket for the show that they came to, and it had lyrics from all of the songs on the album, and I wrote monster when I was just a man instead of wicked. And it will forever haunt me, because I'm not getting rid of that jacket, because I worked hard on it. Never sleep again, which is a slogan, tagline, part of the nursery rhyme. Can't turn down your own deathbed. They love to play with, what was that word? Common phrases. That's not the word I'm thinking of. It's like, nope, I'm not gonna get it today. Where the glove is God. Tina says, what does she say? Please God. She says, please God. And he goes, this is God. And that's, such a good scene. And then, of course, there is the 1-2 buckle my shoe rhyme that they come up with. It's not the same lyrics. 1-2, dreams do come true. 3-4, see you at the morgue. 5-6, he'll get his fix, which is referencing, I believe it's the 6th movie, where a heroin or just a drug addict is being tormented by Freddy, and all of his fingers, instead of knives, are needles. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. One of the girls on the vocals for the rhyme for the movie is actually Bob Shaye's daughter. Oh, I have mascara in my hair. The rhyme obviously came from 1-2, buckle my shoe, blah, 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 blah. Shit. Get off. 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 Oh, did I just do it again? It's good. It's fine. Hey, click. Hey, click. Can I help myself? The melody for the 1-2, Freddy's coming for you. was written by Heather Langenkamp's then boyfriend and now husband, as a matter of fact. It's like the most evil Christmas. Yes. Stripes are hard. And that's all I have for A Nightmare on Elm Street. Hope you enjoyed my look. And I hope you enjoyed my information. I will see you again. Bye-bye.